King Solomon, known as the wisest man who ever lived, blessed by God with unmatched wisdom, staggering wealth, and immense power. But what really happened to this great king? How did a man so favored by God end his life in despair, regret, and spiritual ruin? Join us as we uncover the untold story of Solomon's last day, a day filled with reflections on his glory, his downfalls, and the tragic consequences of turning away from God. Discover how a king who had it all ended up saying everything is meaningless and what his story means for us today. Stay with us until the end to witness the powerful lessons from Solomon's life that can still change ours. What can we learn from his mistakes? How can we avoid the traps that led him? This story is not just about a king. It's about every one of us who has ever struggled with pride, temptation, and the pull of worldly desires. If you find this story inspiring and eye-opening, please hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and click the notification bell so you never miss an update. Your support helps us bring more powerful biblical stories and life-changing lessons straight to you. We also encourage you to share your thoughts. What stood out to you most about Solomon's journey? Leave a comment below. We love hearing from our community, and don't forget to share this video with your friends and family, because these timeless lessons are meant to be shared. So let's dive into the final chapter of King Solomon's life and discover the ultimate truth behind his rise, his fall, and the heartbreaking end of the wisest king of Israel. Don't miss this powerful story that could change the way you view your own life. Let's get started. King Solomon began his reign with incredible promise. He was the son of David and Bathsheba, chosen by God to ascend the throne of Israel after David's reign. From the very beginning, Solomon's journey was marked by divine favor and guidance. In 1 Kings 3:5, we read that the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream at Gibeon, saying, "Ask for whatever you want me to give you in response." Solomon made a request that would define his legacy. He didn't ask for wealth, long life, or the death of his enemies. Instead, in 1 Kings 3:9, Solomon humbly asked, "Give your servant an understanding heart to judge your people, that I may discern between good and evil, for who is able to govern this great people of yours?" God was greatly pleased with Solomon's request in 1 Kings 3:10-14. God not only granted Solomon unparalleled wisdom, but also promised him riches, honor, and a long life on the condition that Solomon would remain faithful to God's commands. Solomon's wisdom was immediately put to the test when two women came before him, both claiming to be the mother of the same child. This event, recorded in 1 Kings 3:16-28, showcases Solomon's God-given discernment. He suggested dividing the living child in two, knowing the true mother would rather give up her claim than see her son killed. The people of Israel marveled at his wisdom, realizing that God's wisdom was truly with their king. From that moment, Solomon's fame spread far and wide. In 1 Kings 4:29-30, it is written, God gave Solomon wisdom and very great insight and a breadth of understanding as measureless as the sand on the seashore. Solomon's wisdom was greater than the wisdom of all the people of the East and greater than all the wisdom of Egypt. He authored 3,000 proverbs and over 1,000 songs. 1 Kings 4:32, covering themes of life, nature, leadership, and faith. Solomon's wisdom attracted the attention of the Queen of Sheba, a powerful monarch who traveled a great distance to test his wisdom with hard questions. In 1 Kings 10:6-7, she declared, "The report I heard in my own country about your achieve miss, and your wisdom is true. But I did not believe these things until I came and saw with my own eyes. Indeed, not even half was told me in wisdom and wealth. You have far exceeded the report I heard." This encounter highlighted how God's blessing on Solomon was not only personal, but a testament to God's favor upon Israel. But Solomon's most significant achievement was the construction of the temple in Jerusalem, a task that his father David had longed to fulfill. Solomon's temple, described in 1 Kings chapter 6, was an architectural marvel of its time built. With the finest materials, cedar from Lebanon, gold, silver, and bronze, it took 7 years to complete and stood as the spiritual center of Israel, a place where God's presence dwelt among his people. 1 Kings 8:10-11, when the temple was completed, Solomon led the nation in a powerful prayer of dedication in 1 Kings 8:22-53. He prayed acknowledging God's greatness and asking him to hear the prayers of his people. Solomon's heartfelt prayer is summarized in 1 Kings 8 verse 23. Lord, the God of Israel, there is no God like you in heaven above or on earth below you, who keep your covenant of love with your servants who continue wholeheartedly in your way under Solomon's rule. Israel reached unprecedented heights of wealth, power, and influence. Solomon's kingdom was a beacon of prosperity, attracting traders, scholars, and rulers from all corners of the ancient world, as recorded in 1 Kings 10:23-24. King Solomon was greater in riches and wisdom than all the other kings of the earth. The whole world sought audience with Solomon to hear the wisdom God had put in his heart. Solomon's wealth was beyond measure. He controlled trade routes that connected Egypt to Mesopotamia, bringing in gold, silver, ivory, apes, and peacocks from distant lands. 1 Kings 10:22, his fleet of ships returned every 3 years, laden with treasures, demonstrating his far-reaching influence in 1 Kings 10:14, we learn that Solomon's annual income in gold alone was 666 talents, over 25 tons of gold each year. Solomon's throne was unlike any other described in 1 Kings 10:18-2. It was made of ivory and overlaid with pure gold, with 6 steps, each flanked by 12 lions, one on each side of every step. It was a symbol of his unparalleled power, and there was nothing like it in any other kingdom. The lavishness extended beyond the palace in 1 Kings 10, verse 21. It is noted all King Solomon's goblets were gold, and all the household articles in the palace of the forest of Lebanon were pure gold. Nothing was made of silver, because silver was considered of little value in Solomon's days. This illustrates the sheer abundance and opulence of his reign, where even silver was seen as commonplace and unworthy. Yet with this immense wealth came temptation. Solomon's power and influence led him to form alliances with surrounding nations, often sealed through marriage. The Bible tells us in 1 Kings 11:1-2 that Solomon loved many foreign women, including Moabites, Ammonites, Sidonians, and Hittites nations. The Lord had warned Israel against intermarrying with, for they would surely turn their hearts after other gods. Solomon took these warnings lightly. He had 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines. 1 Kings 11:3. These marriages were more than mere political alliances. They were a direct violation of God's command in Deuteronomy 17 verse 17, which instructed that the king must not take many wives, or his heart will be led astray. As Solomon's reign progressed, the influence of his foreign wives began to take a heavy toll on his spiritual life. The Bible tells us in 1 Kings 11:4, as Solomon grew old, his wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not fully devoted to the Lord his God, as the heart of David, his father, had been, despite all the wisdom God had given him. Solomon allowed his love for these women to overshadow his devotion to the God of Israel. Solomon's disobedience manifested in the construction of high places, altars on elevated grounds where sacrifices and worship to foreign gods took place. He built altars for Ashth, the goddess of the Sidonians, a deity associated with fertility and sensuality, directly opposing the holiness of God. 1 Kings 11:5. He also constructed high places for Kosh, the god of the Moabites, and Molech, the god of the Ammonites, whose worship involved child sacrifice, a practice utterly detestable to the Lord. 1 Kings 11:7-8. These weren't just acts of cultural acceptance. They were bold violations of God's clear commandments. In Deuteronomy 12:2-3, God had instructed the Israelites to destroy every high place dedicated to other gods, not build new ones. Solomon's actions were blatant disobedience. The tragic irony of Solomon's story is that the very wisdom he prayed for, to discern good from evil, was now clouded by his own moral compromises. He became entangled in idolatry, something God had warned Israel against since Moses' time. In Deuteronomy 7:3-4, God commanded, "Do not intermarry with them, for they will turn your children away from following me to serve other gods." Despite these warnings, Solomon's heart was drawn away. His divided loyalty stood in stark contrast to his father David, who, despite his own failings, remained devoted to God. God's anger toward Solomon was not hidden. The Lord appeared to Solomon twice, first at Gibeon, then in Jerusalem, reaffirming his covenant and warning him to walk faithfully. In 1 Kings 9:6-7, God said, "But if you or your descendants turn away from me and do not observe the commands and decrees I have given you, then I will cut off Israel from the land I have given them." Yet despite these warnings, Solomon's heart grew hard. He kept building shrines and engaging in idol worship. 1 Kings 11:9-10 records, "The Lord became angry with Solomon because his heart had turned away from the Lord, the God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice." Although he had forbidden Solomon to follow other gods, Solomon did not keep the Lord's command. Solomon's tragic downfall stands as a powerful warning. The man who had everything, wisdom, wealth, and divine favor, let his heart be seduced by foreign gods and the influence of those around him. He traded devotion to God for the acceptance of his wives and their idols. The God who had blessed Solomon so abundantly now delivered a severe judgment. In 1 Kings 11:11, the Lord declared, "Since this is your attitude and you have not kept my covenant and my decrees, I will most certainly tear the kingdom away from you and give it to one of your subordinates." This prophecy marked the beginning of the end for Israel's united kingdom. The once glorious realm Solomon built with God's blessing was now set on a path toward division and conflict. God's judgment was swift, yet tempered with mercy. For David's sake, God wouldn't tear the kingdom away during Solomon's lifetime. The full weight would fall on his son, Rehoboam. 1 Kings 11:12-13. God's judgment was a direct result of Solomon's unfaithfulness. Though chosen by God, his heart had strayed too far. In 1 Kings 11:29-31, the prophet Ahijah met Jeroboam, one of Solomon's officials, outside Jerusalem. Ahijah tore his new cloak into 12 pieces and said, "Take 10 pieces for yourself, for this is what the Lord says. See, I am going to tear the kingdom out of Solomon's hand and give you 10 tribes." On his last day, King Solomon, once the wisest and wealthiest man alive, sat in his palace, reflecting on the splendor that had defined his reign. His life had been filled with astonishing achievements. Wisdom that amazed nations, wealth beyond measure, and a kingdom at its zenith. But his final moments weren't filled with joy, but with deep loss, disobedience, and regret. Solomon's reflections are captured in Ecclesiastes, a book attributed to his later years. In Ecclesiastes 1:1-2, Solomon laments, "Meaningless. Meaningless," says the teacher. "Utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless." These words echo the emptiness Solomon felt as he looked back on a life that had drifted from its true purpose. Despite his immense wisdom, he had lost sight of the God who gave him everything. As he sat in his palace, Solomon's mind wandered through the years. He remembered the day he dedicated the temple, a grand, sacred structure built to honor the Lord. 1 Kings 8, he had prayed earnestly for God's presence to fill the temple, and God's glory had descended like a cloud, affirming his pleasure with Solomon's work. But now Solomon's heart was far from those days of devotion. In Ecclesiastes 2:10-11, Solomon reflects on the vanity of his pursuits. "I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my labor, and this was the reward for all my toil. Yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. Solomon's wealth allowed him every pleasure: grand palaces, vineyards, treasures, exotic animals, countless servants and musicians. Yet in old age, all these accomplishments felt hollow. He had chased everything the world offered, but lost his spiritual direction. The once wise king now understood that all his achievements were worthless without God. Ecclesiastes 5:10 highlights the futility. Whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. This too is meaningless. Solomon realized too late that his desires had led him away from God's path. In his youth, Solomon had a close relationship with God. He built the temple as a symbol of God's presence. But over time, his many foreign marriages and compromises with idolatry distanced him from the Lord. He had forsaken his first love, the God of his youth, who had appeared to him in dreams and granted him unparalleled wisdom. Solomon's writings reveal a man who experienced life's highs and lows. In Proverbs 3:5-6, he once counseled, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your path straight." Yet he failed to follow his own wisdom. In his pursuit of earthly pleasures, he leaned on his own understanding and strayed from God's path. In Ecclesiastes 12:13, Solomon gives his final advice. "Now all has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind." These words, written at the end of his life, capture what Solomon finally realized: that obedience to God is the only true path to fulfillment. Solomon's last day was a somber reminder of how fleeting earthly pursuits are. He had been granted the greatest gifts, but squandered them by turning from God. As he faced his final moments, he understood that wisdom, wealth, and power were worthless without a heart devoted to the Lord. In Ecclesiastes 7:29, Solomon shares a poignant truth. "This only have I found. God created mankind upright, but they have gone in search of many schemes." The wisest man of his time had fallen into the schemes of his own making. His final reflections serve as a warning to all who seek fulfillment in the world rather than in God. Solomon's story is a sobering lesson on the importance of staying true to God. His last day wasn't marked by celebration, but by deep reflection on what he had lost. He started with so much promise, yet his final years were clouded by regret. The wisest king who ever lived learned the hard way that no amount of wealth, wisdom, or pleasure could replace a heart fully devoted to God. May we take to heart Solomon's final words and remember that our true purpose is not in chasing earthly gain, but in fearing God and keeping his commandments. Solomon's legacy reminds us that life's greatest treasures are found not in what we build for ourselves, but in our relationship with our Creator. The last day of King Solomon's life wasn't marked by the joy of victory, but by the sorrow of a life that had strayed from God. Let's learn from his mistakes. It's not how you start, but how you finish that matters. May we all strive to remain faithful to God until the very end. Thank you for watching. If you found this story enlightening, please like, subscribe, and share. Remember, true wisdom comes from following God with all your heart, mind, and soul.